Welcome back to the Coffee and Kidlit Show. My name is Travis D. Peterson, and I am a children's book author as well as a book designer. And I like to welcome other children's book authors on the show and talk about their books as well as their whole publishing journey. And today I have a very special guest. Her name is J.L. Rames, and she is the author of A Pirate at Sea. And if you can tell by the title, let me get it in the camera vision here. Couple of different versions of the word sea there. So we're going to figure out what that's all about. But thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about being here.
Absolutely. So for anyone watching, feel free to leave questions in the chat. And this we'll have a little time for question and answer throughout, basically. And yeah, looking forward to this conversation. So should I call you JL?
Yeah, you can call me JL or you can call me
Okay,
Joe. Absolutely.
sounds
Yeah.
good. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your background as well as your kids.
Yeah, absolutely. So my full name is Joanne Longton Rames, but my author name is JL Rames. I have two beautiful children, a daughter Faith and a son Darian. Faith is 10 and Darian's 5. I am a full-time teacher. I have a passion for education. I believe that that anything can have a teachable moment or a lesson involved, much to the annoyance of my children. I like to mention that I am the Canadian ambassador for an organization called Know the Glow. They are a nonprofit that raises awareness about the glow and the 20 different eye conditions that it can indicate, such as retinoblastoma and Coats disease. I do a lot of work for this organization. I do a lot of support for their global awareness campaigns, community outreach, fundraising, establishing connections with influencers and support groups that align with Know the Glow's mission. And along these lines, I'm also a very strong digital advocate. So I'm dedicated to sharing my journey about Coats disease, sharing resources on vision health, Know the Glow awareness campaigns, and of course, my children's book, Adventures with Darian, A Pirate at Sea. So that's just a little bit about me.
And so you said you're a full-time teacher. What age or what grade are you teaching?
So I am qualified for primary as well as intermediate. So I did a grade 6, grade 7, and I'm just finishing up that contract. And I recently got hired to do grades 7, 8, and 9 for art. So I'm very excited about that because at heart, I'm your quintessential art teacher. I love art. I love creativity. I often, even if I'm a full-time classroom teacher, I'll tell kids to, draw outside those lines. It's okay, So, and it's a metaphor, right? So I'm like, it's okay to do that. So I love that sense of abstract thought and creativity and autonomy. And I try to strive for that.
That's really great. What's your favorite medium for art
Oh
yourself?
man. So I think my favorite medium used to be oil. I really love the acrylic and oil mixing together. But now, because we're moving towards a new digital era, I actually incorporate a lot of, I try to encourage students to dabble in photography, to Photoshop. Even doing Canva now is a really wonderful way to explore different creative means through a digital resource. So I'm actually kind of shifting to teach 21st century skills as an artist because I see longevity in marketing, graphic design. And if a kid has a natural talent, I'm always like, hey, do that artwork, paint those paintings, but let's explore the digital aspect too, because that can be, and it can be a combination effect too. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I know within sort of the design and art world, the topic right now is AI.
I
And we're
know.
getting way off topic, but what's your opinion about AI right now? Are you kind of looking forward to teaching your students a little bit about that, or
Yeah.
are you like avoid that at all costs, or what?
Well, I think when anything's new and it feels, and sometimes new things are threatening, right? It's change.
Mhm.
But I think that's the whole idea of anything that's being introduced that we're not very unsure of. I think an important thing to remember is to adapt and to learn about something if you question it. And you shouldn't allow fear to be a barrier. to explore something and make a concisive, like make a decision then. I think
Mhm.
AI is something we indirectly as authors, especially self-published authors, we are going to have to embrace the next stages of what that means, whether it is something we welcome or something that we don't welcome. My personal view on AI is that it's unfortunate, I think sometimes, but I'm like, you know what, if this is something that is a lot more people are going to go to, what's going to happen with that? What can I do to learn about it? Can I incorporate this for my own future? Can I embrace it to say, okay, this is the next stages? So I think right now I'm open to learning about it.
Mhm.
I'm not disliking it. I'm not liking it. But I think I have to be open to learn more and make a better informed decision.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It seems like a good tool for maybe research and kind of developing the first stages of things, but going beyond that, you kind of have to tread carefully.
Yes.
Um, yeah, absolutely. And even with the research, I've done a little bit of research with AI, and the answers are a bit all over the place.
Yes.
Certainly not really trusted information. But
Right? And that's the
anyways,
same thing even with, I think I just recently learned about something called GPT. And
yeah.
that's like very the same thing, taking dialogue and then, but then there is that possibility of like infringement or it's, copywriting. Like it's a lot, it's a safety security. A lot of it comes down to, and that
Mhm.
copyright aspect. And we as self-publishing authors are very, very much aware how important copyright is. So I
Yeah.
think it's something interesting in all facets, but I do believe AI is here and it's something that we're going to have to learn about and how we have to understand.
Mhm. Yeah, it's definitely not going anywhere. It's going to be around
Yeah,
for a while. So, yeah.
absolutely.
Well, tell us more about your book, A Pirate at Sea.
And I love that you pointed out the pun on words. So as a
Yes,
primary
I love that.
teacher, if when I'm teaching, so I taught like grade 1 class and I'm always telling them about play on words. I'm like, "Oh, I go over there. There's your stuff." And they're like, "Oh, Miss L, you're so funny." Because I'm always telling, I love joking with the students of the importance of how words, if it has a different spelling, has a different meaning. But it sounds the same. And so for me,
Mhm.
the kids always get really excited. So that was something when I came up with the title, I was really having a hard time. I was like, what am I going to name? And then it came to me. I was talking with some of my students and they're like, Miss L, you love doing this. And I was like, yeah, maybe I'll play on words, CC. So that's how I came up with that because obviously, my book has a central theme. It's a multi themed book. There's a lot of things that I really wanted to push forward. But one of them, obviously, is the concept of vision impairment, glasses, patches. So I thought C was a very appropriate hint to what my book was going to be
Mhm.
about. But yeah, so A Pirate at Sea is a fun adventure story about Darian the Daring. And he's a boy with a prosthetic eye. And his journey to the Seven Seas celebration is to compete in the most political pirate contest. He wants more than anything in the world to win. And in order to get this award, or yeah, there we go. In order to get that, he needs to have the biggest and best treasure. But there's a little bit of a hiccup. He's having a hard time reading the treasure map with his seeing eye to find the treasure. So he gravels with that. He's like, how am I going to find this treasure? But he figures out a way to solve his vision impairment by inventing glasses and patches. However, he doesn't find the treasure in time and he feels a little discouraged, but he still ends up going to the Seven Seas celebration. And it's there where he is surprised to learn that there are other pirates, other individuals like him there that are saying, hey, what are those glasses? Why are you wearing these patches? Hey, that's like me. I'm having a hard time seeing soon. Like seeing as well. And so he makes glasses and patches for them. And by the end of the celebration, Darian ends up winning the political pirate contest. And the point that I wanted to make for my readers is that the whole central theme is that it's not what you have that matters the most. It's what you do to can help others. That is the
Mhm.
greatest reward or the greatest treasure. So yeah.
Yeah, I really love that because
Mm,
it kind of reflects my own book, Ada and the Helpers, which talks a lot about helping others and using your gifts or your strengths
yeah.
to help others. So Darian certainly does that. It's such a fun story, and I love sort of the entrepreneurial
Yes.
spirit that he has. And
Yes.
he sees a need, and he starts his own piratical business. And I love that word. I'm going to start using that now.
Yes.
It's so
It's a lot
fun.
of fun. It's a great adjective. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Darian, your son, as well as the pirate, they
Mhm.
both have something called Coates disease.
Yes.
For those who might be watching that aren't familiar with that disease, can you just tell us a bit more about what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I wrote the book too, as well, so this is kind of the first book that I wanted had a little bit more of a universal appeal. I didn't touch base too much about Coates disease in the actual book, but I wanted to highlight, why he has a prosthetic eye and, what that vision impairment means for him. So Coates disease is an extremely rare eye disease. What happens is there is an abnormal development of blood vessels in the retina, and basically, the retina is at the back of the eye. It's the lining of the back of the eye that transmits light images to the brain. And that's how we can see. When someone has Coates disease, if they have an abnormal development of the blood vessels, these blood vessels leak. And what it causes is it interferes or it causes an obstruction of the light being transmitted to the brain. And this is how Coates disease is a degenerative disease. There are different stages, meaning so if that blood vessels aren't taken care of, if they're not properly getting treatment, it's going to cause vision loss. Now, there are 5 stages to this disease. One being not as it's not as impactful on your vision, and stage 5 being the last stage. So it's important to note that the severity of that also looks different with Coates disease too as well, but the treatment for each one of those stages varies as well. Um, so because it's so rare, it's like something like 0.09 out of
Mm.
100,000 people actually have Coates disease. There's no cure for people that have Coates. So oftentimes people that get this diagnosis, they live their life almost in limbo because it is a degenerative disease. They can get the treatments, but it's almost very unpredictable. When my son was diagnosed, we took him to the hospital, the sick kids. They said, "Yeah, it's Coates disease." It was either that, or they thought it could have been retinoblastoma, which is eye cancer. And obviously, that was a very stressful, experience. That whole it was very like a whirlwind event. We got diagnosed, and they didn't know what stage he was in at that point. So we did a follow up appointment, and we went to the hospital about well, we didn't go to the hospital. It was we were making an appointment 3 months later, and his eye completely degenerated. So within that time frame, he must have been at maybe stage 3, stage 4, and it just went. So he had severe vomiting, which we later found out that because of the abnormal blood vessels in the back of his eye, it pooled. It was just completely all the blood vessels were just they exploded almost, and it caused an
Mm.
extreme pressure in the back of his eye, so it was causing him to vomit. So we had to be admitted into the emergency section of sick kids, where he was formally diagnosed with stage 5. So stage 5 means he had retina detachment because of the bloody the leaky blood vessels,
Mm.
and that caused the detachment. So at that stage, retina detachment, there are surgeries that are possible to reconnect, but it's very rare for that to happen. And because of his disease, it would have made it very impractical. So his eye was painful. It was sore. He was at the last stage, and we were faced with a hard decision as a family, and there wasn't a
Yeah.
lot of options. And I think that's something that I think has propelled me forward to do my ambassador work so that I can spread awareness about eye health. I can, spread awareness about Coach disease, but most importantly, to prevent this from happening to another family.
Mm. Yeah. Um, Talk to us a little bit about that moment, I guess, when I guess you got the diagnosis in the hospital, what were some of your own thoughts, and how did you take this as a family, and how was Darian handling it himself?
Yeah. So when this all kind of started, Darian was about 2. And that's why when I even do any kind of information about videos, oftentimes younger children under the age of 5, and I should also know retinoblastoma is very prevalent under the age of 5.
Okay.
Um, that oftentimes children don't know that what they're experiencing with their vision is normal or not normal. So in my son's case, when he was slipping into Coats disease, he was losing vision in his eye and it was painful, but he would say, "Oh, it hurts." Or he started having a lazy eye. And for me, I saw these little signs, but he wasn't communicating because he was so young.
Mhm.
And that's something I really make a point of. That's why it's very important. Do your once a year, eye exam with your children, especially under the age of 5. They don't know how to communicate this. But I think what happened was, yeah, so that's a big part of what I do for my work. But when I was there and we got the diagnosis, and, when we were at the hospital, and this all happened within a week. So we're admitted into emergency. We don't know what's happening. They're saying, yep, stage 5. We don't think there's a possibility that we can do anything to save this eye. The best medical outcome for Darian at this point would be inoculation, which is the term for eye removal,
Mhm.
because his eye was so sore and painful. And, you know, I think getting that information, it's just hard as a parent because you're thinking, okay, is there any other options? And you think, is there anything? And the medical team, who are highly trained in this field, I had, coat specialists, I had, retinoblastoma specialists working as a part of the medical team. And when they're telling this to you, you have to trust in the medical professionals that are supervising because they know what's best for your son. But I think
Mhm.
even as a parent, though, to be faced with an option, and that's something I'm thinking for me, I always have to kind of look back in reflection to say, I was given the information I was given, and I made the best choice possible at that time. And, you know, I think that's something that, as Darian gets older, I have to be upfront to say, what, there are moments where I look back and but there was nothing we could have done. There was really no other option. And
Yeah.
these are hard conversations that I have to, face with my own son. And I know that I'm raising him, to embrace who he is, to understand that having a prosthetic eye is just one part of who he is and his
Mhm.
identity. But yeah, I think that moment really part of my own healing, and that's I will eventually probably talk about that. Part of my own healing is I wrote stories to cope
Mhm.
with the loss and the tragedy that this occurred because it was so quick. And when anything happens so quickly, you don't really have time to process that. But yeah, I think in reflection moving forward, I can, help other families and do positive work and change the narrative on my tragedy and make it into positive outcomes for others.
Yeah, I really like what you said, that part of your own healing was writing these stories, and it was the same for me. For those who don't know, I have a deaf daughter who is actually the same age as Darian, 5. He's 5, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
fine.
So she has cochlear implants that help her to communicate. She's able to hear us and respond with verbal answers, and so it was going through the grieving process of figuring this whole thing out as a parent that really pushed me to write children's books, just very similar to your situation. And so I think that's a good note for any other author or any other parents out there with kids with any kind of disability, that
Yeah,
maybe writing children's books might be a way to sort of help you in the
yeah,
healing process or the grieving process or whatever you may
yeah.
be going through. So how is his his vision now with a prosthetic eye and one eye that the other one is completely fine, right?
Yeah, he does have a little bit of he does require prescription for his seeing eye as well.
Okay.
But and that has nothing, that's just, how vision works. As you can see, mom
Yeah.
wears glasses too.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's fine. And and that's another thing with Coats disease too. It typically, statistically, it only actually affects one eye, and it's predominantly seen in males, and it's usually diagnosed under the age of 17. So it's just one of
Wow.
those, it's a very, they don't understand why it happens. They don't understand the reason for it, and there is no
Mm.
cure. So, but yeah, his seeing eye, yeah, he needs a little prescription, but he does well. And interesting enough, because I wanted to see if there was any potential accommodation for my school board that I work for, and the Vision Resource Center was like, legally he can still drive, so technically he doesn't really need any kind of accommodation. And
Mm.
for me, I was like, okay. And it's not that, because for me, I tell Darian all the time, like, you can do anything anyone else can. You just have a blind spot, just do the do that 360 swoop. That's how
Mhm.
we do it. We're like, make sure you're checking your blind spot all the time. But yeah, I thought that was quite interesting that because he has monocular vision, he still doesn't really qualify for any kind of accommodation. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah,
That is
legally he
interesting.
can
Yeah.
drive, so he can, but I do believe, that depth perception with sports. So I do a lot of like games with Darian to help him with his monocular vision. So we do a lot of sports, a lot of, throwings to help with that hand and eye coordination,
Mm.
understand the concepts with depth. I get him to pour things all the time. So it's tricky for him. Like, he's adapted extremely well, more, I think, a lot more than, say, someone who's later on in life who's losing an eye with monocular vision. So he's adapted well, but yeah, he's still, tricky things. Oh, swooping for that depth perception. The end of the stairs is tricky when everything's the same color,
Oh,
that
yeah.
bottom step. So if you cover your eye, you would really get to see the world the way Darian does, but he's adapted really
Mm.
well to it.
Yeah. Have you seen, like, is he sort of I don't want to say, how do I want to say this? Like for Esther, my daughter, one thing we noticed early on, and it may have even been before we knew her diagnosis, was that she had this way of just capturing your attention with her eyes. Like her way of observing things around her with her eyes was kind of her strength in a way. She's very
Yeah.
observant.
Yeah.
So do you see with Darian that maybe some of his other senses are a bit stronger to
Yeah.
sort of
Compensating.
compensate?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
interesting that you say that. Yeah, I think with Darian, for example, because he does have that blind spot, the monocular vision, he is really good with his hearing skills. So he
Mm.
can, so I think when any sight naturally is compensated by almost like another one, even without
Yeah.
realizing it. So Darian has really impeccable hearing capabilities. He is, I wonder, I'm like, is this an environmental thing or is this genetic? But he is able to retain large amounts of information through by listening and deciphering it out and saying, big words and all this other stuff. So I find that quite interesting that you did
Mhm.
bring that up. But I think it is a natural compensation that people, if one sense goes, it's like an evolutionary thing. It's
Yeah.
almost our body is processed to say, oh, something, ding, 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 it's not working properly here. Let's increase this part. Let's increase that. Let's compensate. So, yeah, absolutely, I would agree.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty amazing to see those things happen. So this particular book, A Pirate at Sea, you talked a little bit about what sort of inspired you to start writing children's books,
Mhm.
but tell us a little bit more about this particular book. What inspired you to sort of get the word out there
Yeah.
and kind of bring awareness to Coats disease, as well as you know how you came up with the theme of the book and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, part of my healing process was several stories. This one was, I do believe it was like the third or fourth one. And when I was chatting with friends and coworkers, they said that this particular book was a little bit more universal because I
Mm.
really kind of gloss over it's not a gloss over, I wouldn't say, but I do an umbrella effect with different types of vision impairment. So I thought, okay, maybe that would be the first one to start off with. But as part of my healing process, I never really set out to be an author. I still feel like I have imposter syndrome. I'm not really an author. I'm a teacher, but
I
um,
know that well.
yeah, it's really, yeah, that's the whole thing. So like the inspiration was, so here I am, healing process, I'm writing, I'm doing my thing, but I went on Amazon and I really wanted to find some books for my son where, something that could help him with his journey with monocular vision, or, something, where he could relate to a character that's like him. And much to my unhappiness, I was like, there's nothing literally out there for my son. I mean, there's a couple books about getting glasses. Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
But nothing where there's a character in a children's book with, a prosthetic eye, or, talking about vision impairment, or making that part of a fun kind of fun aspect to the book. So I was like, oh no, I can't do that. My son needs to see himself in a book, and not just a medical book, not a book that's kind of boring, or a book where it's not fun. I'm like, this isn't fair. I'm like, oh no, I'm going to do this. So I set out, and I that's when I did a whole bunch of my stories. I looked through and they said this one is more of a universal. And I said, okay, let's do this. I want children like my son to see themselves represented in a book where they can see themselves. And that was the whole motivation. And I just couldn't imagine all these children, because and this is the scary thing about things like retinoblastoma or Coates disease. Coates disease in itself, usually at stage 5, eye removal is still a very last resort. It's not something that's common even for, Coates disease. But I know that there are children out there, that have retinoblastoma, and they have a tumor in their eye and they have to remove their eye. I mean, this is something that these children need to see themselves in a book, and a fun book. So I think my inspiration was for all children like my son, and children all over the world, where they can say, you know what, that's a fun book.
Mm.
That's a good book. And I have a prosthetic eye too. So that was the whole motivation, inspiration behind it.
So, what would you say to parents who are facing the same diagnosis with their kid?
Yeah, absolutely. When my son was diagnosed, I felt very isolated in a lot of ways. Um, what happened was, I kind of started doing research, which led me to Facebook groups, which led me to the Jack McGovern Coates Disease Foundation, which led me to Know the Glow. And I made connections through these organizations, and they really helped to say, you're not alone. This is a rare disease, which means it's very limited, but here are some people connect with. And the whole thing that I would say to any family that's going through an initial diagnosis is make connections with organizations that will have the resources that you need to thrive. And number one is, in these resources, is making sure that you join Facebook groups about Coates disease. Make sure that you join groups, newsletters, or go to websites where there is a mother who has a child with Coates disease and she does a newsletter. Or there's so many wonderful organizations that will really excel in the support, because that's the whole thing. I think at the end of the day, the support really helps alleviate those feelings of isolation. And we know that isolation is the foundation of mental well-being, and that can be quite traumatic, especially as a parent, if the child's young and they're not quite understanding what's happening. It gives you the information, the education you need about understanding about Coates disease, and understanding that there are treatments available, that you can preserve vision that you can ensure that your child will be seeing, that they will be able to see with proper treatments, making connections with medical research, medical advisors. So I think that is the first thing that I would say to parents,
Mm.
and let them know that they're not alone. And that's even for my work that I do, I'm like, if you ever, because I do make connections with other Coates disease patients, or parents with kids that have Coates disease, and if any questions, I'm like, yeah, send it my way, I'm here to help. And that's the beautiful world about social media. That's the beautiful world about that global aspect to social media, and the web. So I think that's important. So creating resources, creating support, connections, and yeah, just doing the research about it.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's so great, because you've gone beyond just sort of being an advocate. You've gone beyond writing a children's book about it, but you're actually sort of actively involved in these organizations, and I'm sure that opens up a lot of doors, not only for your own growth and learning in
Mm,
the process, but also sort of being a face for these new parents that are coming up and
yeah.
facing this new situation. And yeah, so that's so good.
Mm,
I want to give you a chance to sort of talk about both of these organizations
yeah.
just for a couple of minutes, just
Yes.
to sort of give a little intro to both of them. The first one was you mentioned the Jack McGovern Coates Disease
Hmm.
Foundation,
Yes.
coatesdiseasefoundation.org. Uh,
Hmm.
Tell us a little bit about them, what they do, and yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the Jack McGovern Coates Disease Foundation, they really are the leader in resources for Coates disease. So they really are the go-to for understanding and learning about the disease. They have a wonderful a patient database, so you can actually become part of. They have like a patient register, like you register as a patient with your child, and it becomes part of the research database that they have. Like you share, diagnosis, what happened, everything. They're very much focused as a foundation on research and finding a cure for Coates disease. So they do a lot of funding to fund medical research, and in that aspect too, that's very much a comfort to parents that have children with Coates disease, knowing that there is a foundation out there that is fighting relentlessly to finding a cure. And Tina McGovern is the one that started the foundation. She was a mother. Her son Jack has Coates disease, and
Mhm.
it all started because there was such a lack of information. And so she set out to do this foundation, and it has obviously expanded
Mhm.
massively. So it is a really wonderful resource. When it comes to so I am an Canadian ambassador for Know the Glow, and that the Know the Glow is more of an umbrella. So it does take in Coates disease, but it takes in like retinoblastoma, it talks about cataracts. So what Know the Glow does is that it does a lot of global campaigns, and their whole thing is preventative measures. What can we do to prevent and preserve, preventing childhood blindness from these 20 different, eye conditions? And all the 20 eye conditions can be signaled through the glow in the eye, which is something I wanted to. So when I first initially thought something was wrong with Darian because he had a lazy eye, and he was saying, oh, he was saying weird things out. So I was taking some pictures, and I noticed that in one of his eyes was a white glow. When you have a white glow, that's actually indicating something there's something not right in your eye. And so I reached out and I shared my story with Megan Weber, who is the co-founder of Know the Glow. And it just rippled. We just developed such a wonderful relationship. And eventually I just started doing ambassador work for them.
This was before you knew the diagnosis?
Yeah, this was before I
Okay.
knew the diagnosis. And I was like, what's this white glow? So then I'm doing research, and it was like retinoblastoma. It could mean this. I was like, obviously. And that's when I took him in to see the eye doctor. The eye doctor referred me to Sick Kids, and that's when he was diagnosed with Coates disease, but they weren't sure of what stage. And then it was the ripple effect. Within 2 months, his eye just completely degenerated. So it was almost like, hey, here's your diagnosis. All of a sudden, we didn't even have the means to preserve his vision because it just rapidly deteriorated. But with Know the Glow, what I do is we help with our global campaigns to make people aware that, if you do, and it's mostly through flash photography, right? If you see the glow once, just be alert. But if you repeatedly see like a white glow in a child's eye, that could indicate something's wrong. And it's not to panic. We're trying to advocate to say, hey, don't panic. Just go to the eye doctor. But I think the whole big thing is the importance of, just go to get, do your periodic eye exams. Make that a priority in your family. And as a teacher, I find it very interesting because 80% of our learning is done through our eyes. It's not like we can, and it affects every aspect of a child's learning. So this is something that needs to, we as teachers and educators and the public really need to make it a priority. So Know the Glow is just this wonderful organization started by Megan Webben, and her son was diagnosed with Coates disease too as well. And that's the reason why she started the foundation too, because she wanted people to be aware of the glow and what that could indicate and how we can prevent negative outcomes and stuff. So it's a really two wonderful organizations. They do amazing work. Know the Glow right now just finished up in the UK for a global campaign. I just did an interview with a wonderful influencer there. She had retinoblastoma when she was young, and that's part of our campaigns, right? Like we highlight people that are making impacts, spreading awareness about vision health, and really tie that in with the campaigns. And they're going to Spain next and Switzerland, so it's something that is constantly going, right? So yeah.
How did you get involved? How did you become an ambassador? Was that something that you just kind of, do they have a place on their website where they, have people apply for that, or?
So really, because I was working along with Megan anyway, and I was telling her about my book, she loved the book and everything. And I had to get permission from her to say, hey, can I put you in the back of the book? Like, this is something I really want to tie in, to my story. And she goes, yeah. And it just naturally progressed where she's like, you know what, Joanne, we're starting a new program, part of our organization, which is ambassadors. We want to create a global network of ambassadors around the world that can really, because what Megan was trying to say, for her, she's like, just because we finish a campaign in a country doesn't mean that we don't want to continue our outreach. And so she's like, she just finished the campaign in Canada. And after she was finished, she's like, you know what, would you like to be an ambassador? I said, absolutely. I would love to do that. And so I jumped to the chance. We started collaborating together. I have my projects that I work on independently, as well as teaching and being a mom, which is a lot of work. But but yeah, if you are interested, what happens is if you go to knowtheglow.org and you go to their website, it's a wonderful resource too, as well, for anyone that is, interested in learning more about eye vision and the glow. But there is an ambassador section there, and it talks about the ambassadors, and it also has a little, blurb at the end there. Like, if you're interested, come and be in contact. And I think, is it an application process? Probably not. But if you're interested, you would then connect with someone part of the organization, and then you would just kind of go from there.
So for anyone watching this, once again, coatesdiseasefoundation.org for the Jack McGovern Coates Disease Foundation, as well as knowtheglow.org if you're looking for a couple of organizations to get involved with. By the way, we're not finished with this interview. We have a lot of more questions, but if you want a copy of A Pirate at Sea, you'll find the link down in the description of this podcast or video, wherever you are listening or watching this interview. So be sure to check out J.L. Raines' book, A Pirate at Sea. Now, I think on Amazon, you have it as SEA and SEE, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I saw that.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Making sure you get all the SEO you can.
I know. Right. Which I'm just learning about now, which I'm Oh gosh. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Again, if you like this kind of content, if you like listening to the background stories of children's book authors, please hit the subscribe button and follow along. I love these conversations because
Mm,
I learn so much as a host, and I know those who are watching do as well. So it's
mm,
really great to have children's book authors and self-published authors on the show. Just
mm.
so much great content. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I just have to throw that in there. And then I'm also doing something new. This is called the C&K Book Club. You can go to my Patreon. That's patreon.com/launch mission. And you can sign up for the monthly book club. And for anyone who signs up, they'll get a physical copy from one of the authors that I have on the show each month. So it's
Mm.
a monthly uh, book subscription, you might say. So check that out. And now we go on to the rest of the story, as they
Yeah.
say. Um, I really like this. You have this in the back of your book here, and I want to read the whole paragraph. This is part of your author's note. You say, I hope this story inspires children with vision impairment to see themselves as heroes or as regular kids, where vision impairment is not the focus of their life stories, but merely a part of it. Let's create meaningful conversations where we celebrate our differences and respect the uniqueness in us all.
Yeah, absolutely. That's obviously that's everything about my son, right? That's right there in
Mhm.
a nutshell. So I think with Darian, we don't focus on the fact that he has prosthetic eye. Do we talk about it? Sometimes, sure. But that whole that whole paragraph there is because my son he wears many different hats. Having a prosthetic eye is one part of him. And,
Mhm.
there's so much more to him. He is daring. He's enthusiastic. He's caring. He's helpful. He loves coloring. He loves flipping, throwing popcorn in the air and catching it with his mouth. He is your typical 5-year-old boy. And who just happens to have a prosthetic eye. And for me, that's the point in that story that he is the inventor and he recognizes that there's a gap. He says, "Oh, okay. I want to find this treasure. I want to win. What do I need to do it?" And he goes ahead and he does that. He doesn't allow himself to be, held back. And he also spreads the importance of helping, which is really, as human beings, that should be a big part of our journey is understanding others, helping others, leading with kindness. And I think for me, raising my child is exactly the same way. He's going to be doing soccer, for the summertime. He might have some hiccups because of his blind spots, but that's something he's going to have to adjust and learn to. I think that it's just for all children that, we're
Mhm.
not perfect. None of us are perfect. We all have different types of things about our personality that we might say, oh, is this holding us back? But it's not. It's actually pushing us forward. If we realize that we are an umbrella, that we have many hats to wear, that I think overall we become a better version of ourselves or our best possible version. And I think, allowing Darian to share his story and sharing with the world that he has a prosthetic eye or whatever, that's allowing him to show that different's okay and different. But different doesn't mean bad. Different doesn't mean good. It's just
That's
we're
right.
all different. And I think that's the most important thing. And there's so many creative individuals in this world that are doing things like that, that are spreading, hey, I'm different, but this is my story. This is one part of my identity. And this is, there are lots of influencers that are doing that. Christina King is an amazing ocularist from like Portland who makes fun eyes.
Mhm.
She's really pushing, for that kind of uniqueness that comes with, don't blend in, stand out. And I love that too. And I just did an interview with her last month about that. And she loves doing that for people that have prosthetic eyes. So I think we're in just a new age. We're in a new world. And I think that that's the point of my story. Hey, prosthetic eye here, vision impairment. But let's make that part of the conversation. Let's make that meaningful. But let's also focus on the other things too as well. And
Absolutely.
that's important. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's easy, especially for children's book authors, to think that they need to put out a book that focuses on this particular awareness or disability, disease, whatever it may be.
Hmm.
And that's fine. We need more books like that, especially with how rare Coates disease is, for example. It might be helpful to have a children's book that kind of
Yep.
explains the journey of getting a prosthetic eye or whatever it may
Yep.
be. But just like in your case, we also need these adventurous kids that
Yes.
they just want to have fun and sail the seven seas
Yes.
become piratical and yeah.
Yes.
So I think that's fantastic. We need more of that as well.
Absolutely.
So
I couldn't agree
yeah,
more because
yeah.
children like my son or any kind of child that has any kind of disabilities or learning difficulties. I mean, why do we need to focus only on that? That's part of their story. That's not all of
Mhm.
it. And
That's
as
right.
authors, we need to follow that same philosophy.
That's right. That's right.
Mhm.
So, this is your first book that you published,
Yes.
and it was just released in December, I believe, right?
Yes.
December 2022.
Yes, that's correct.
Um, Talk to us a little bit about the publishing journey. What was your biggest challenge publishing this book?
Yeah, I think initially there's a lot of learning, which as a teacher, I love learning. So I was all about it. But I think someone that comes into, self-publishing, really, it's a big learning curve. It's a learning curve in terms of understanding that, oh, wait, I need an investment before I actually, like, I've written this story.
Mhm.
What's happening next? So I think a really big thing, I think the biggest hurdle for me was probably ignorance, not knowing what was part of that aspect of being a self-published author. I literally, so when I wrote this manuscript, I put it out. I thought, okay, I'm going to put it to the big heads here. I'm going to get that manuscript approval. They're going to come clamoring and they're going to sign me and yay, and I put it out and I waited for months and I was like, do. And then you start
Mhm.
doubting yourself. You go through a lot of, oh, maybe this isn't good. What did I do wrong? And then you learn that, traditional publishing in itself is very, very, very hard to get into. And even if your manuscript is good, it's like 5%. Like it's a really low statistic about the amount of books that they actually accept and they actually
Mhm.
publish. And I knew that I wanted the story to get out. And I said, what, I'm not going to wait. Either a traditional publishing agency is going to pick it up. Maybe that will happen next year, but I'm not going to wait for that. I'm going to take control. So then I went into the self-publishing aspect of things. And the first thing I did was, join Facebook groups. And then I ended up following people like yourself or Stacy or Michael. There's so many wonderful self-publishing authors that have really shared their journey and it's through that sharing that is so key because you give little bits of information. Oh, hey, I did this. Oh, look out for this. Oh, go over here. This is a great book designer. And you start learning and saying, oh, okay. Even I think Vicki Weber, I think she's another one, stay-at-home author. She has a
Yep.
lot of resources too. But I think the hurdle that I found for me was that initial startup of investment. If you are just starting up, you need to understand that is an investment. You really need to invest in an editor. So I worked with Robin Lauren, and she's tough. She is a tough cookie, but she is good. She's a great editor. If
Mhm.
you believe in your product and you want it to go somewhere, you need to invest in it. You need money, you need time, you need effort and resilience and patience. And if you don't have that, it's going to be a hard process. So I would say
Absolutely.
make sure you have those 5 components, do your research, join support groups, understand that you need to have depending on how much money you want to invest, but you have to do the editor. And if you want your book to sell, a big part of it is illustrations. You get what you pay for if you're going to be investing. So even with Daniel's extremely popular. He is a very independent, creative thinker when it comes to his artistic expressions. And that works great with me, so we collaborated very well together, but he's extremely talented and he's highly in demand. I had to book him months in advance. And that's the part that I didn't think. I thought, oh, I'm finished. I have my edited manuscript. I'm going to go find an illustrator. Wow, that's a journey. And you don't know. So there's that thing too. Go to Facebook support groups, find out what is legit, join, there are some wonderful organizations where they actually have, trustworthy illustrators that are part of those networks as well. And you learn that through research. You can't just expect everything to happen. You have to work
That's
at
right.
it.
Yep. That's right. And, even for those very lucky and blessed people who get picked up by a traditional publisher, there's still a lot of work. There's still a lot to learn.
Yes. Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, the journey ahead is long and very chaotic and scary at times, but the more you research, the more you learn, the better off you are. So absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So what was the biggest triumph during your publishing journey so far? Now you're fairly new. You just published in December, and it's easy for authors to think, oh, I'm published, I'm done.
Yes.
No,
No.
the journey's just beginning.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
you're a new author. So far, what's been your biggest triumph?
Oh, goodness. I think it's reception. I don't really focus on numbers, and I don't know if that's a good thing. I don't know. But I think for me is the reception. I love that fact that I have been, for my school board too. I have friends who are librarians who are like, we have this book at, da, da, da. And I had a student the other day who was from another school, and they're like, oh, you're that author. And I was like, oh, they're like, are you famous now? I'm like, no, but thanks. And I think that's kind of the triumph. I think that comes through that it is a slow and steady success, and the reception of it. I know it's a good book. I know that it's a good book in the sense of its story, the content, the message. So I'm very confident in that. And getting that reception is really good. Even I was participated in the Disability Week, and Megan Higgins, who I really is amazing. She's a great author herself. You obviously probably have heard of Megan. She's great. She did a review of my book, and it was the best review. It was just lovely. And I really loved being part of that and being part of the foundation that she's doing for her. So that was really very, very neat. I think it's those connections that you make. So for me, my triumphs is knowing that my book is getting out there, that kids are reading it, that kids are liking it. And that I know it's a steady gain, but I'm not focusing on the numbers of it. Sometimes if you look at Amazon, it's very skewed anyway. There's like millions of books out there. So you have to really remind yourself of the greater, it's like drawing outside of the lines. You have to see the greater picture of it. And you just have to say, okay, am I working hard? What am I doing? What is the real purpose of my book? Am I doing this because I want to make a profit? Am I doing this because this is a career that I want to go into? Is this a hobby? Is this a hobby where it has a mission? So you just need to ask yourself those questions. But for me, it's the spreading the message, inclusion, sharing Darian's story. That's the triumph in itself, I think.
Absolutely. And those are questions that you really need to ask yourself at the beginning before you even, get into all of the steps to publishing your first book. You have to decide, is this going to be a business for me, or am I just doing this to sort of itch my own or scratch my own itch, or, what is it for? Why are you doing this? And let those answers decide how you go forward. Now, it can always change. You can always decide, maybe I've got something here. Maybe I do need to turn this into a business, or, try to pursue this a little bit more. And that's okay. But if you have those answers in the beginning, that will help you in the steps ahead. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Agreed. And I think it's hard to figure that one out. But I think if you ask those questions in the beginning, it changes that long-term goal and that long-term plan, and it would have a significant impact on how you do your book later on. And
Mhm.
I really think maybe I could add that back to the last one. What would I tell first-time authors? Yeah, is to figure out what is your objective? Like, what is your goal? Like, is this
Yeah.
a business? Is this a hobby? Because that will massively make everything different. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. Do you have any final advice for first time authors?
Yeah, absolutely. Which I guess is kind of leading into that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, asking yourself the questions of what your long term objective is. If you're treating it like a business, then you really need to be smart with your moves and find out each month, like, make that it's like, being a teacher, we do long year plans, right? We figure out, okay,
Mhm.
this is what we're doing. These are the end goals. This is the formative task, summative task, and you plan everything out. Likewise, if it's a business, you also have to figure that one out too as well. And you have to invest in it. So you have to have some money behind you to really, any kind of money that you invest is like it generates, and eventually you want to get to the point in your business where you start making profits. But you have to gamble in the beginning. If you believe in your product, you have to lose a little bit in the beginning in order to get where you need to go. And taking, like, investing in like Amazon ads, or, understanding the marketing. There's, depending on your goal, like, do you want to publish on Amazon? I argue that most authors should, because it is a global marketplace for
Mhm.
getting your name out there. But it doesn't have to be the only avenue. You can invest in Amazon ads that way, push yourself that way too as well, but also focus on, how am I going to get my name out? You still have to draw people into Amazon. You still have to draw people to your products. So you have to work on that aspect too as well. So I think the first time advice is, I would, is understanding the objective. If you're doing it as a personal hobby, then you can approach it in a very different way. I was very self-sufficient because I was trying to always save myself money. So, like, I do Canva. I'm creative, so I enjoy that. So I did all my graphics. I uploaded, to Ingram Spark. I uploaded to Amazon. I just figured it out. And a massive resource that I would say to all first-time authors is utilize YouTube, because it is
Yeah.
really the best way. That's if you have time though. So, like, if you're not tech savvy and you don't like, you're okay with spending money and, getting someone else to do that for you, sure. But for me, I was like, well, I like learning. I have time. I'm gonna do this myself. So I did a lot of stuff by myself. So,
Mhm.
um, and that was fun. So yeah, I think that's something to consider too as well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, JL. You've got your first book out now, and now you have hinted that you've written several
Mhm.
actually in sort of the same genre.
Yep.
What's next? Do you have anything that you're wanting to work on next, or any sneak peeks for us, or what would you
I
like to
don't
share?
Yeah, I don't have any physical to share, but
Yeah.
I am working on another manuscript. I am working with my editor, Robin Lauren, who is amazing. So I just did, I guess, the first stage of my edit, which is a developmental edit on my manuscript. So I wrote the story a long time ago. And I've actually have two other stories that I'm really excited about, but it's a slow process balancing full-time work, being a mom and everything, and my ambassador
Mhm.
work. So yeah, I have other books to come. I have two solid books that I'm really confident in that I will eventually release. So I'm hoping I can release maybe one book a year for the next two books. So maybe like two more books, three more books. So yeah, so I'm excited to continue Darian's story, and I'm excited to continue inclusion, representation, and promoting awareness about vision health. So yeah, I guess I can say that's what's next on
Yeah,
the
that's
agenda there.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, we all look forward to seeing what's next, and I hope that we get to see a bit more from Darian. And
Yes.
what's the sister's name? It's
Faith,
not
and
in the
she's in the
title.
book too as well.
Yeah.
She's always doing a cameo. So even in my next book, she doesn't say anything, but but she definitely has a good predominant role, part of the, that kind of conflict in the thing. So yeah, she's in all my books too. And as you would know, often our real life is the inspiration of our books that we do. So
That's
yeah,
right.
her name's Faith. So she's Faith the Ferocious. She's pretty ferocious in real life too.
Yeah, love that. By the way, just a quick disclaimer, pirates did not invent eyeglasses or eye
No,
patches.
no,
I love that you had that in the book.
I know.
So I had to throw that in there. So yeah, by the way, if you want, once again, if you want a copy of A Pirate at Sea, find the link down in the description. And I hope you'll check out JL Rames on social media, as well as these great organizations that she has talked about today. And it's been so fun talking to you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was really wonderful chatting and getting to share my book and my mission. So yeah, it was great.
Absolutely. So please join us in about 3 weeks, exactly 3 weeks. On May 9th, I will have Lynn Hawthorne, who is the author of Mom's Not Wiping Your Bum.
I like that.
And I'm looking forward to that conversation. She's got a fun book, so looking forward to that.
The title says it all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So thanks everyone for watching, and for you authors out there, go and write the book.
Absolutely.
We'll see you next time.
Just do it.